It's so irrational when Lewis wants to know the gap he's got behind him, and the guy starts telling him what tyres they're all on. I mean, what's that all about? No wonder Lewis thought that he's done something wrong. The reality is, of course, they did something wrong because they cost him a three-place grid penalty, did they not? It was pathetic, and it wasn't a motor race. It was Le Mans. It was. We don't want that. We don't. That isn't Grand Prix racing. So yeah, very sad to see that. But you see where the fans are at. They're so frustrated, I think, at what Monaco is. That of course somebody coming into Formula One relatively recently from the outside would say, why do we need this ridiculous circuit where you can't overtake and it's really boring? Lando needs to isolate himself from all that glad, happy McLaren stuff and become much more leaner and meaner if he wants to win the World Championship this year and beat Oscar Piastri, because that's still his biggest problem.
Welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour. With me as always, my friend and yours, the goatiest of F1 minds to have ever goated, the one that they call Peter Windsor. How are you doing, sir?
Pretty rested, Cameron. Yeah, relaxed afternoon yesterday. Not much going on, was there? So yeah, pretty chill. The Monaco Grand Prix was not one of the best I've seen, that is for sure. And no doubt we'll be talking about that. Very sad, really, because Monaco's always meant a lot to, I think it means a lot to everybody in Formula One or in motor racing in general, because it's such an absurd place to put Grand Prix cars and to have them going round and round the way they do, and the noise they make, and the spectacle they produce. And when you think about the history of the race, and particularly the time of Grace Kelly coming over to the Cannes Film Festival and meeting Prince Rainier, and then Paris Match setting up a meeting between the two formally in the Palace Gardens as they walked around, and then the engagement and the marriage, and then everything that did for Monaco, those two in open top cars doing laps of the circuit before the race and presenting the trophies. And that had never happened really in any sport, let alone in Formula One. And suddenly Monaco became this piece of magic, this gem, and we still have it today. And yet Formula One is completely, out of sync with the nature of the circuit. A lot of people would say Monaco is completely out of sync with Formula One, but I looked at it the other way, because Monaco was there first, if you see what I mean. They didn't ask for these huge cars that are impossible to drive around Monaco if you want to try and overtake the car in front. And so for everybody that says Monaco's out of sync, it should be off the calendar, I say, when they sit down and define the regulations for the next era, why don't they say, well, this is the car we need for Monaco, now let's build that, and then we'll try and see what happens at all the other racetracks, because Monaco is still it's a critical part of Formula One, and we dismiss it at our peril. So it's so sad to see that race yesterday, and I predicted that whole two-stop strategy thing would be a disaster, and it was. And nobody listened, but there you go. It was a complete disaster, because it didn't have the effect of making everybody drive faster because there were two stints and therefore you could use the tyres more. It was the opposite effect. It absolutely neutralised the race to the point where tyre management meant nothing anymore. So everybody just drove around as slowly as they could in the hope that they might be able to get a gap and do their two pit stops at the end or whatever it was going to be, or at the beginning, and just hold everybody else up. It was pathetic. And it wasn't a motor race. It was Le Mans, It was. We don't want that. That isn't Grand Prix racing. So yeah, very sad to see that. And one other point actually just occurred to me. You and I were chatting before this, but in 1952 and 1953, the Formula One regulations changed dramatically, basically to suit Enzo Ferrari. He had a really good little Formula 2 engine, and with some other manufacturers were going to pull out anyway. So they said, okay, we'll go with Ferrari's route. And they basically made Formula 2 Formula 1. And Alberto Ascari basically won everything in the Formula 2, Formula 1 Ferrari those 2 years. But Monaco didn't like that. They didn't like the way that regulation had been changed and the new formula. So they didn't stage a race in 52 and 53. They just said, okay, well, we don't want to be a part of this. Maybe that's what they should be doing. Rather than F1 saying, do we want to keep Monaco? I think Monaco should be saying, do we want to keep Formula 1? Let's give them a break for a couple of years, as we did in 52 and 53. And it worked, because, 54, Merck came back and the Grand Prix was back on again, and Princess Grace was there and everything was fine. But yeah, it's an interesting little thing to think about that, isn't it? 52 and 53. And the Monaco Grand Prix that year was won by an Italian. As I only say that because a graphic came up saying the Monaco Grand Prix has only been won twice by an Italian driver since the championship was incepted. And that's not correct, because it's three: 52, 50, Riccardo Patrese, 82, and then Jarno Trulli, of course. So, yeah, anyway, there you go.
The encyclopedic knowledge.
Well, no,
Mr.
it's just,
Windsor.
you could argue it wasn't a Grand Prix race in the sense that it was in 54 or had been in 51, but nonetheless, 52, 53. Grand Prix was hell. It was just for sports cars.
Yeah. Mr. Windsor, let me ask you the question this way. Is Monaco now too much circus and not enough circuit? Because it feels like this is, like you said, this is the Grand Prix that the A-listers want to turn up to. That you see the Naomi Campbells and the Simones and the Brad Pitts turn up to it. But then you get an absolute SH1T show that we did yesterday, and all of the brand new Drive to Survive fans are like, well, I'm dialing out of F1 because I've been missold a dream. I'm never going to watch a race again. Is it? What was the fix for this, Peter? Sans changing the dimension of the cars, because that's never going to happen. How do you fix what we saw yesterday?
Well, how long now have I been banging on about how the Netflix thing is scratching the surface of what Formula One can actually provide? There are so many stories to be told behind the scenes of Formula One, whether it be all the stuff still to do with the drivers that we don't get to see, the actual briefings and debriefings, the drivers briefing before the race, the road cars or whatever, or the conversations in the restaurants that night, all that stuff, plus all the other aspects of the Formula One economy, the hospitality, the sponsorship, the finance, the safety, the organization, the younger drivers, so many different things. You could create all these living stories in reality TV, real time probably. And Liberty are in a position to do that because they have a Concord agreement, and you could argue that you don't sign it unless you agree to this, and this access. And maybe some teams would be more open to it than others, but that's not a problem. But they've never done that. All they've done is sold it to Netflix and created this sort of relatively artificial thing, which, as you say, scratches the surface and often does give, well, as I say, scratches the surface and does give a false impression often of what Formula One really is all about. And that's a problem, of course. And I'm not the only person to say that, because we will have boring races in Formula One, even at so-called interesting racetracks with 3 DRSs. Not that I personally think they're interesting, but so yeah, that's the problem. I think what you then have to say is, well, let's get rid of what people think about it. Let's just have a look at how we can make Monaco more interesting. And certainly, if we had much more access to what was going on in those offices above the pit lane in real time, and we had great audio from the race engineers, from the designers and engineers, from the mechanics, from the team principals, from all those teams, when we know it's going to be a relatively boring race on a boring circuit with little overtaking, you filter a lot more of that in to the TV production. So if you got a lull where you got 5 laps, you know it's just going to be all this string of cars going around doing nothing. The director can cut to the Haas box and let's listen to what they're actually saying, the 2 engineers, about the next pit stop, or let's go down to Ferrari to see what's going on with the Lewis situation. You could bring all that in just as you do onboard cameras. And I've been saying this for I don't know how long, 5, 6 years. More probably. Or you go back to Charles Leclerc waking up that morning, shaving or not shaving, getting to the track. How did he get to the track? You just bring that into the production straight away. I only say that because Richard Seaman did that back in 1939. He invited I think it was Perry Match again, to the Belgian Grand Prix. Sadly, the race in which he lost his life. But that photographer had access to him, his hotel room, everything that was going on, the restaurants. Same with Jackie Stewart with Roman Polanski in 71. You've got to have that. You can't just rely on this sort of superficial, scratching the surface Netflix thing of this is Formula One, and actually it's a miscreation of what Formula One really is all about. You've got to have this real stuff going on. And we've got all the technology to do it, and all you need is a decent director and producer to be able to say this is something that's appropriate or inappropriate. And the teams need to trust that engineer, that director or producer. Again, not a difficult thing to set up. If you're a media company like Liberty, I wouldn't have thought. So that's what that would be my fix. From here on in, every Monaco Grand Prix, we give the fans a completely different view of Formula One. And guess what? They'd all crave that at the next race as well. We want more of that. That's great. That's how I would do it. I mean, the other thing, there's been a lot of stuff coming in this morning. I had an email this morning from Bill Underwood saying, How about this fix for the Monaco Grand Prix? He says each Formula One team, just for that one race, develops its own 250cc gearbox go-kart or kart. And we have the regular Formula One drivers in 250cc gearbox karts around Monaco, plenty of overtaking. They'll probably all love it. They'd all much prefer to drive those things in Grand Prix cars. But you see where the fans are at. They're so frustrated, I think, at what Monaco is, that of course somebody coming into Formula One relatively recently from the outside would say, why do we need this ridiculous circuit where you can't overtake and it's really boring? They're all going to say that. But the fix is there. It's all to do with the way you do the television coverage. And because, you and I were chatting before the show about Lewis and his situation with his race engineer in Ferrari. And that's much more interesting, actually, than the Grand Prix itself. So let's bring that in real life. Why weren't the cameras there filming all that stuff?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Peter, but I think that the gift of the tag team that was Drive to Survive, COVID, and then you get the Gangbusters 2021 season, and it's Max and it's Lewis, and one of the best back and forth seasons that we've ever seen in Formula One, was that Drive to Survive was the promise. That was the bait. Come and have a look at this. And then 2021 happened that over-delivered on that promise. So ultimately, I completely agree with what you're saying, Peter, that if you do all these extra bits and bobs around the Monaco Grand Prix, then that's the lead in, that's the window dressing. But then the racing has to deliver a la a 1992.
I don't think it does. I think
you don't think so, Peter?
Sorry to interrupt, Cameron, but it's an important point just to stop you, not you, but in general. I don't think the racing does have to deliver. Racing's never delivered at Monaco. It's not a circuit for overtaking. It's a circuit for, in the old days, it was a circuit for an arduous Grand Prix, 100 laps. Many drivers wilted under the physical strain. That is no longer an issue. But it's a circuit also for time management, for not making a mistake under pressure. But if you take away the pressure and you take away the importance of time management, what have you got left? And those things could still be brought out in a very impressive way if you wanted to flick back to the action. But I repeat my point, you do a different production mix for the Monaco Grand Prix, and you have a lot more background stuff going on in real time.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think we're singing from the same hymn sheet broadly, Peter, but I just think if you're going to, I still think you need a 1992. 1992 can't happen every year because that's a unicorn of a Grand Prix in any circumstance, let alone Monaco. But before this conversation, Peter, I was watching 1992 to try and understand what was it that made that race so great that we don't have, or that we didn't have.
Okay, will you tell me
yesterday.
why you think that race was great?
Because in the final three, okay, so it's Nigel and it's Ayrton, two behemoths of F1. But I think boiled down to brass tacks, Peter, the 1992 final 3 laps, okay, so it was circumstance and it was an unbalanced right rear of Nigel that kind of that conspired against Nigel. And it would have been a dominant race for Nigel otherwise. But I think in the final 3 laps of that race, Peter, it's uncertainty. It's must-watch TV simply because you, as an F1 fan, you don't know who's going to win that race. Okay, 9 times out of 10, Ayrton gets it done because it's so difficult to overtake. But you've got Nigel in a dominant Williams car, and I'm glued. Even just watching it back now, Peter, I'm glued because I still don't know if Ayrton's going to get it over the line, and that's what we lacked yesterday. All of that uncertainty and stakes. There was zero of it. You can watch turn 1 and Lando locks up, but shortly thereafter it's stasis, and you can go and do something with the misses and the little one for 76 laps and come back firm in the knowledge that Lando's still going to be, that we're going to be as you were. So I think it's uncertainty and stakes that we're missing, Peter. I don't know. I don't have the exam answers to that question. I don't know how you infuse that back into the Monaco Grand Prix, but that's for sure. That's what we're missing. It was as you were.
But it's interesting you talk about that race, that 92 race, that way, because I was TM of Williams that year, and obviously I remember that as if it was yesterday. And those last 3 laps, I just signed off. So there's no way he's just going to block him, and it's exactly what he did. And I didn't think that was racing. In fact, I was a little bit annoyed. I never said this to Nigel. I never really said it to anyone, but I was a bit annoyed that Nigel just didn't go down the inside into Morobo, take him out and win the race.
Oh,
And I think he was kind of justified to do that, given the things that Ayrton had done to Nigel up until that point, particularly Spa 87. So, yeah, I think I think it was a really frustrating, annoying end of the race and proof that you can't overtake at Monaco.
yeah.
That's what I saw. I never, in my mind, I didn't think of that as a great Grand Prix, really. If I try and think of great Monaco Grand Prix, it's only to do with the conditions or drivers forcing others into mistakes or great tire management, things like that. Carlos Reutemann 80, yeah, he predicted Alan Jones would something would happen with the back end of the car, diff, crown wheel and pinion, the way he was driving, and it did. And I thought that was very, very impressive.
Yeah.
And I love the way Carlos drove when it was wet, and it was 82.
Yeah.
81. I mean, if I actually think about Monaco and how much I love Monaco, it's usually on Saturdays. It's usually qualifying, and it's
1000%.
Nigel in 81, for example, qualifying third, I think, in the that was unbelievable. Or Gilles doing so well in that monster of a Ferrari turbo, or things like that, incidents and maybe some shunts and stuff. It's but it does normally bring all that out. But if you start putting all these restrictions on them, like you got to make 2 pit stops, it takes away all the risk as well. And the reason we didn't have any safety cars, we have one at the beginning, virtual safety car. But the reason nothing else happened is that nobody was driving anywhere near the limit. So they're never going to make any mistakes anyway. I mean, what was that all about?
Unbelievable.
I'm not saying you want to encourage accidents. You don't. But if you're not driving near the limit, I mean, George Russell created an incident because he was so frustrated at how slowly everyone was going. And he couldn't get past his mate, Alex Albon. It was, and good luck to George. I think George was absolutely right. And it was brilliant the way he said, I don't want to hear any more. And no more talking. Get off the radio. This is just a joke. And I think he was right. He's absolutely right. It was not Formula One. And as I say, the only way, I think, short of taking Monaco off the calendar, and obviously I'm beating the drum saying this must never happen, the only way you're going to bring it to life now, if you're going to build cars that work on circuits like Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Abu Dhabi and Vegas and all these DRS circuits, which current Grand Prix cars are basically built for. If you're going to do that, and you're then going to go to Monaco, this cute little street circuit, purely because the sponsors love it, and without it, a lot of the sponsors would probably pull out, you've got to have it, then the only thing you can do is boost up the show, the background show into absolutely the forefront of your mind when you're watching it. And you've got to have the Ferrari box, Ferrari intercom, really, really good audio, free split frame with Lewis driving the car. And you've got to be able to hear and see what's going on properly, rather than just, the engineers pressing buttons and things like that. We've got to know what's happening. And then you'll make Monaco a much more interesting Grand Prix, in my opinion, even if you had something as stupid as that 2-stop rule. Hopefully they'll take that off next year, so we won't have to talk about it anymore. But I hope they don't try and do something else then, which they might, of course. They might change one of the, I don't know what they'll do. Getting rid of the chicane or something. I don't know. That's something crazy. But leave it as it is, but just increase the background show. That would be my prescription on how to make Monaco work.
Oh, Mr. Windsor, I think they've got to do so. The one thing that I'd say in defence of F1/the FIA is that sometimes you've got to roll the dice, and you're not always going to roll a 6. I think they had to at least try something. It didn't work. Let's regroup and maybe revert to the mean, do what we have been doing. But I think they're to be commended for trying something potentially. But I mean, you pointed out in your video, Peter, that Ollie Behrman was 3 seconds quicker in last place, as near as makes no difference, than was Lando Norris.
At the beginning of the race on full tanks. I mean, what's that all about? I mean, that was about the worst thing that could have happened to Formula One, was for Ollie Behrman to come in and then be on a free track for a few laps. Because then it just put everything into perspective. But going back to your point about we should give them a bit of a pass because they've got to try something, I kind of disagree with that as well, because the whole premise is we've got to fix it, Whereas my premise at the start of the show was to say it's unfixable. We've got Monaco. It's got this amazing history. It plays this amazing role in Formula One's commercial program. live with it. There's no way we're going to change it unless you change the cars. So that's not going to happen. So let's look at other creative ways of doing it. So I think they went into it thinking, we've got to change it. We've got to change it. We've got to fix it. But you can't fix it.
No.
So I disagree with you. I don't think we should allow them a year for a pass for trying something, because it was never going to work anyway, as I predicted.
It's a difficult one, this, Peter. This is back to the new demographic, right? That 40% of people, as at May of 2025, who are watching Formula One are our beloved Drive to Survivors, brand new to the sport, who are never going to watch a Monaco Grand Prix. Ultimately, I suppose context is needed. It's one race of 24. You're not going to disenfranchise 40% of the F1 community just because Monaco's a bit of a procession every year. But I don't know,
but we've had this discussion before, Cameron, and what we don't know, or maybe you do, is the stats of how many of these so-called Drive to Survive new generation Formula One viewers actually watch all the other 23 Grand Prix from start to finish.
Good shout. It's a very good shout. Yeah.
Very few, I would expect. In fact, if they're listening to this, they'd probably say, "Oh, Windsor's probably got a point here. We would much prefer to see, Charles Leclerc going to the track and shaving or not shaving, and we would prefer to see the look on the face of Ferrari's race engineer when he's getting a nasty look from Freddie Vasseur or whatever George Russell's engineer did when George gave him that message. We would want to see that. It's quite good TV if it's produced well and directed well." And I think I do have a point. I think that's exactly what it's all there. It's just that nobody's filming it and nobody's taking advantage of it and using it commercially. But it's all there to be done. We don't need to do anything. Just open the doors and make it happen. Very simple. It's all there. And to their credit, Formula One teams and Liberty have created all that world, but we never get to see it. Right? What's going on in the motorhomes down on the harbour front, away from the pit lane when the Grand Prix is on? What's everybody thinking there? A lot of the parents and the family and all that are all watching it. Why aren't we seeing a bit more of that? It's no good just cutting to Lando's dad, the lap he's going to take the checkered flag. Why aren't we cutting to Lando's dad when he's talking to his mate when Lando's under pressure from Charles? That's what we want to see. That sort of stuff. And we want it mic'd up. That's how you're going to get people interested in the race again. Just taking little moments like that, mic up all the key people and bring them into the production. If you know it's going to be a boring race, which it always is going to be at Monaco.
You make good points. Very sound points as always, Peter. But
I'm sorry to be banging on about it, as I have done for 6 years, about how we don't use enough of what's out there in Formula One and bring it to the net. These guys, the Netflixers.
I think your point stands up in theory, Peter. But when you've got the Sky Sports internationally syndicated broadcaster who can't even tell you whether Max is racing Isaac Hadjar as versus Lewis Hamilton, or I don't know whether Alex Albon. Do you know what I mean? They're missing these minor details, so let alone be able to give you like a 2-tier.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolute hiding to nothing to try to produce and cover a Monaco Grand Prix in the conventional, normal way that any production team does it. You've got to have a totally different approach, and you've got to be really switched on and know what you're doing and understand what stories are going to be interesting and what are not. And just to go down the old hackneyed route of the way they've always done it, this is what we're going to do. Let's hope it's a great race. That's pathetic, isn't it?
Yeah, ever so slight, and they can't even do that.
I'm not going to criticize others because everybody makes mistakes and stuff. So that's not correct. All I'm saying is, you go down a traditional path of production on a circuit where there's never going to be any overtaking. You're going to have a traditional backlash of a boring race.
Yeah. Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Talk to me about our old mate Lando Norris, who apparently has been watching the F1 Hour and your YouTube channel, Peter Windsor. For the longest time, you've been beating the drum that there is durable competitive advantage for Lando if he dials out of all things social media. We learn by dint of ESPN's article that Lando Norris, before the Monaco Grand Prix in the week leading up to it, has done what? Dialed out of all things social media. And then what does he do? He executes, in a pressurised circumstance, threads the F1 needle through the streets of Monte Carlo and drops it on pole. Coincidence, Mr. Windsor?
What did I tell you? Yeah, not coincidence, no. And guess what? After the race, I suspect a part of him wanted to get onto social media and beat the drum. But I guess he then thought, wow, I've got more time to share this with my my family and close friends and my team and everybody around me. And this is my world. And I'm Lando Norris again. And I hope that's the way he felt. And I'm sure that is the way he felt, to be honest, because it isn't about a brand and it isn't about an image that you have to try to live up to once you've created that brand and that image. It's about being a racing driver, an athlete living in your own bubble, as I've been saying for so long. And that does go right down to the way you drive the car and having that gut feel of doing it the way you've always done it, rather than the way the engineer is kind of pushing you towards, because that's what Oscar's doing, or exposing you even to what Oscar's doing. And the more he can isolate himself from here on in, even from Oscar, let alone from the outside world, the better he's going to do, for sure. And it was interesting to see Oscar go a little bit the other way this weekend. He was quite oversteery and a few mistakes, and given the benefit of the doubt, as I said in the video, on a Friday for not going up the escape road. But then that was a sign that he's a little bit overconfident. He probably felt he could make that corner, Sanderboat, when he went off, but the escape rope staring him in the face. Didn't have the excuse that Charles had at Baku. Remember when at first Ferrari year, I think, in Baku, when he was very quick, and then they put him on a set of used tires, and he locked up going into that tight left and crashed into the guardrail instead of going up the escape road. And at the next race, I said, Charles, why did you do that? And he said, oh, I didn't know I'd locked up. I said, what do you mean you didn't know I'd locked up? He said, I couldn't see it because the car's going uphill. And I couldn't actually feel or see that it was locked up because they were on mediums, had no feel. And I thought, wow, isn't that what the track walk on Thursday is supposed to be all about? And the same thing, actually, completely separate to this. But when Lance Stroll started squealing about, I couldn't see, I was blinded when I came out of the tunnel. I couldn't see whether it was Gasly or Leclerc or something, wasn't it? He confused the two. I think it was those two. I can't remember. It was something like that. But then surely again, that is something that you prepare for on the Thursday, isn't it? You say, right, I've got the glare here. What am I going to do if there's two cars coming up? I'm on a slow lap and two quick cars, and where am I going to position the car and how am I going to make sure? Isn't that what those Thursday track walks are all about? They're obviously not, because they all go around with cameramen, guys on bikes, engineers. It's a big photo thing, and all of a sudden they're not talking about real things like, this could happen. What would happen if I did that? And if I went off here, what would I do? All the things that a proper racer would think about. And Ayrton Senna, for example, they're not thinking about those things, quite clearly. Not at Aston Martin anyway, because it never occurred to Lance Stroll to think about what would happen if he did have the glare coming out of the tunnel, as if he's the only driver that's ever had to face glare coming out of the tunnel at Monte Carlo.
Yeah, I think it's I think that's a Lance Stroll thing that you're talking about, Peter. But Fernando.
Sorry, yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, it didn't happen to Fernando, right? So I think that's more a Lance Stroll thing than an Aston Martin specific thing. I think it's time, isn't it, Peter? It's been time for a while now. Lance has not been wholly invested in F1 as a venture and a sporting endeavour, but I'd say the past 36 months, and you can see it not just in his demeanour, but in his performances on track.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness to Lance, an engineer has to work to the character and the background and the experience of the driver, engineers in general, specific to that driver. And there's no good treating Lance Stroll like Fernando Alonso when it comes to detail like that. By now, they should know that you've got to spoon feed Lance a lot more with little details like that when you're on the track walk. Fernando's going to immediately suss that, and he's not even going to think about it. And he's probably not even going to think, oh, I better remind Lance about that, because he'll just assume it's there. But if you've been working with Lance for that long, you should by now know that he's not going to think of that, and make sure you do spoon feed him. And that's what they're not doing. And the engineers aren't doing that. They're focused too much on the data and the car being geometrically perfect through the corner because he's the Formula One driver and everything's going to be related to digital numbers at this point, that point, that point. It's not like that. Formula One is not like that, as we saw with Lance Stroll in that incident. And what was the other point you finished with there?
Whether Lance's stay.
Oh, yeah, his future.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But you could argue he should never have been in Formula One in the first place. And the reason he is because of his dad. And the reason he got the Williams drive is because of his dad. Sorry, the Prema drive is because of his dad. Then he got the Williams drive. Then he bought a team for him. And that team is Aston Martin. So on the verge of brilliant success with the Adrian Newey 26 car, where he could potentially win Grand Prix. I don't think he's about to retire and turn his back. I think, on the contrary, he's probably thinking, not interested in this. I want to drive the Adrian car. Give me the Adrian car now. I want the Adrian car. Don't want this car.
Unbelievable. And Adrian came to Lance Stroll's defense, and I don't know how.
Oh, of course he would, because he works for his dad.
100. He's the shareholder now, isn't he? He's got to say that almost. That's
Well, not got to. Well, yeah, got to, I suppose, is the right word. It's like, well, it's just an accolade, isn't it? You got to go along with it. Sad to see that.
A little bit, Peter. A little bit. I wanted to say to Adrian when he was talking so glowingly about Lance, saying that we need to cut him some slack. But blink twice if you're speaking under duress, Adrian. Just a little bit. Speaking of race engineers, Peter, it would be remiss of me not to speak about Lewis Hamilton and Scuderia Ferrari and what's going on there. Now it feels like Riccardo Adami is coming under increasing pressure as Lewis signed off at the Monaco Grand Prix saying, "Have I done something to upset you, Riccardo?" To which Riccardo responded with radio silence. What do you think is going on there, Peter? And are people that the Ferrari need to start sacking people now with a view to turn around their material underperformance?
I don't know. I don't know what's going on other than that it's normal Ferrari chaos. That's the only way you can describe it. Because to try to get into the minds of these people is impossible, because it's so irrational. It's so irrational when Lewis wants to know the gap he's got behind him and the guy starts telling him what tyres they're all on. I mean, what's that all about? No wonder Lewis thought that he's done something wrong. The reality is, of course, they did something wrong because they cost him a 3-place grid penalty, did they not? Should they not have been on the radio at the end of the race apologising to him? Great drive, Lewis. So sorry. If you'd started where you should have, could have been top 3 today. Massive mistake from our side. But let's move on to Spain. Thank you so much for the job you did. I didn't hear any of that. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. I don't know what was going on. I think Lewis is being a bit over polite in saying, have I done something wrong? Maybe that's the issue. Maybe he's being a bit too kind to them at the moment and not really cracking the whip. Can't imagine Michael Schumacher saying that to Ross Brawn at some point on the radio. Can you? I mean, it would be at the very least, what's going on, Ross? This is a joke or something like that, and it would be with most racing drivers. I think Lewis is, I mean, what can I say? I've been saying, I know he's deleted all his followers on TikTok. I don't know how big a step that is in terms of getting rid of all his social media, but he needs to become hard, tough, mean, lean, get rid of the social media and really, promote his side of the garage and get it all going. I can't say any more than that because it is chaos there, isn't it? It's ridiculous. And you'd think, and I'm absolutely shocked that Freddie Vasseur hasn't got on top of that. And he hasn't got really, really sharp people dealing with it all and making it all happen. And this Riccardo Adami is not, doesn't appear to be of that ilk at all, really, does he?
No.
And but then again, Fred's in his own mind when he goes to bed at night, and I'm sure he'd never say this, but I cannot imagine he wouldn't be thinking, I should have got Adrian Newey, and should I have stopped the Lewis thing? Should I have kept Carlos Sainz just to keep the balance here? And should I have got this engineer from DAMS or ART in rather than just continuing with the same Ferrari guys? He must be thinking that because there are so many things that aren't right there now. And the buck stops with him, actually. It does stop with him. And the reason, if I was a sort of Philip Morris guy promoted to be whatever he is, CEO of Ferrari, knowing nothing about Formula One, the one thing I would have done is looked at Freddie Vasseur's record and I would have thought, yeah, he's the right guy. He's obviously monosyllabic, very tough disciplinarian who will come in and sweep the floor of all the crud and make sure we're all clear and exactly sure of where we're going, constant lines of communication, open, everything working as it should do in a Grand Prix team. That's what you would have assumed.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to be happening, does it? It doesn't seem to be the Fred that is out there now. Maybe Fred's just overwhelmed by the pressure of being a Ferrari superstar, signing autographs one minute and then watching Lewis crash at Casino Square the next.
It's really, but I shouldn't laugh, Peter, because this is not a laughing matter.
No,
anymore.
it's not.
No.
It's not. That incident of Lewis's was the incident when he was on the quick lap was bad. And then obviously he was given completely spurious information when Max was on the quick lap. And watching that, anybody who had been watching, it was FP3, wasn't it? Anyone who had been watching FP3 and watching closely would note that even when Max was on a quick lap, he tended to not be brilliantly quick through Sandervoort and up the hill into Casino Square. In other words, those little segment things that you can see how quick, usually, even when he was going quicker, they were usually yellow on that little bit of his lap. And that's just an amateur watching it. If you're a pro race engineer at Ferrari, you should be completely aware of that. And you should never make a judgment on Verstappen's lap until you really know what he's doing based on those little yellow segments that you see. And they obviously did, because they told Lewis he wasn't on a push lap. How did they know that? How could they possibly know that? And then they changed their mind or whatever, they went one to the, oh no, he's on a quick lap, slow lap. Pathetic. You can't do that.
Yeah.
No wonder that happened. And that cost him 3 grid positions. It's a massive, it was the end of the race for Lewis.
No, unbelievably bad, Peter.
Yeah,
and I suppose if you're going
to that's just lack of, it's lack of looking at all the data that's out there. Because, by Friday, I realized that there's no way to judge a max lap until he got at least to the top of Massenet. So you never make a call if he's on a quick or a slow lap unless you're actually in the Red Bull garage. And yet they made that call. How did they know that?
It's bonkers, Peter. It is really, really bad as far as Ferrari are concerned. And I suppose if you take the 60,000 feet view, they're already 177 points behind in the Constructors' Championship versus McLaren, and they finished the constructors last year 14 points adrift. That smacks of restructuring. Right, somebody's got to lose a job sometime soon this season, surely, Peter. That's really bad. Alcon and Co, the C-suite execs at Scuderia Ferrari, won't stand for that for much longer, I don't think.
Yeah, but it's all very well to say we won't stand for that much longer. I'm not quoting you now, but if they say that, we're not standing for this, it's too late. They should have got Adrian Newey. It's too late now. We should be looking at a new era of Ferrari with Adrian Newey as technical director, Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, looking forward to that 26 car like there's no tomorrow, and Adrian already at races as he is at Aston, sorting out this car a little bit. That's what we should be doing, and we're not. And there are obviously some very good people at Ferrari still, and no criticism to them whatsoever. But it's not, the package is not together in the right way. And as I say, the buck stops with Freddie Vasseur for that. Because you could say, well, the Lewis thing was forced on him. He had to do it. But yeah, I disagree with that. If you hire Freddie Vasseur as the superstar team principal coming in to save the world, he needs to have and should have the ability to stamp his foot and say, no, I want this, I want that. I want to keep Carlos, or I want to have Lewis, whatever he says. But, the buck does stop with him. Personally, it was working quite well, the whole Charles Carlos thing, I think. And it was getting the best from both of them. And their problem was not drivers anyway, as we know. As I keep saying, the problem was the car is the car. And all the effort should have been on getting Adrian Newey. Now, how do we know now? We don't know. But how do we know now that a lot of the effort in trying to get Adrian wasn't diluted by all the negotiations with Lewis Hamilton as well, going on simultaneously? And it didn't detract from the Adrian thing. I mean, the priority by 50,000% was to get Adrian. The next thing, once you got Adrian, well, yeah, what about this Lewis thing? Oh, that's quite interesting, or not. But I bet the Lewis thing became just as important, if not more important, than the Adrian thing when it was all going on at Ferrari. A completely wrong set of perspectives.
Too much circus, Peter, and not enough circuits. Let me ask you about Isaac Hadjar, because I didn't think Isaac had it within him to do what he's did. Like, he's been, I saw a stat that he's outperformed the cumulative points hauls in the driver's standing of both Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson. That's he's doing a good job, this Isaac Hadjar, right, Peter?
He's doing a brilliant job. He's excellent. And I did a comparison on the Saturday video, actually, of the two of them, Lawson and Hadjar, going into the swimming pool. And they're both on quick laps. And Lawson's doing one of these, back end slightly out, lots of sparks coming out, and he's perfect car control, classic Liam Lawson. And then there's Isaac Hadjar, and it could be Max driving the car. It's almost straight, same amount of sparks. He's going just as quickly, but just beautiful, beautiful positioning of the car. He's really good. And what are we? Yeah, by contrast, Yuki Tsunoda looks to be out of his depth, doesn't he, in the other Red Bull now? Not only is it a difficult car to drive, much more difficult than the Racing Bulls, quite clearly, which again shows how good a job Max is doing in brackets. But back to Yuki. Plus, this is the big opportunity of his career. Plus, it's Red Bull and not Racing Bulls. Plus, there's a lot more going on around him. It's all a bit too much, and I'm surprised actually. I thought being, the mentality he had, well, he's always been quite emotional actually for a Japanese driver. He has been quite emotional, so maybe that's the issue. But and he has been, and he was quite emotional at Monaco, wasn't he, when things weren't going right? So maybe that's it. And for Isaac to be out qualifying and out racing Liam Lawson, for me, no real surprise. He's very, very good. He's short corners and sensitivity, and that was clear in F2. And what is a surprise to me is that Liam Lawson hasn't improved really in that respect. He still drives like that. That can work around Monaco because it's all about making sure you don't hit anything and having a well balanced car, and making good use of it that way. And he did. But if he had been in a difficult car around Monaco, if he'd been in a Red Bull, he would have been in the harbour probably. So so yeah, great job by Isaac Hadjar. And yeah, I think we talked about this, what are the chances of him replacing Yuki before the end of the year? I was probably pretty high now, I would have thought. They're going to be looking at that and thinking, yeah, we need Hadjar in the A team. So good luck to him if that happens. Really, really good. I mean, it was interesting though, wasn't it, in that race yesterday where he eventually finished sixth? It required an interesting strategy of two very quick pit stops right at the beginning, and then unbelievably slow driving mid-race to get the tyres to last. He was doing 19s for Pete's sake. I mean, I think I could do 19s around that. I couldn't, but you know what I mean. A lot of people could do 19s with their eyes shut around there. So, and again, I think we should be a little bit careful of how much we praise drivers who scored well in that race yesterday, because a lot of it was obviously just grid position, and then beyond that it was, I don't know what it was really. It was just a bit of droning around and making the right call at the right time.
A bit of,
it wasn't a race.
It was a tax avoidance GP, wasn't it? That's what it was. They were bending / breaking the rules to optimise for their points. That it's a weird one, isn't it, Peter? Probably better at this stage as we round third base to talk about warmer climes. Barcelona up next. A very different circumstance. An old school driver's track of a circuit. To save a dying puppy, Peter, bearing in mind, again, considering front and centre of the mind, all the things that have happened with McLaren and the thermoelectric cooling in inverted commas, and then Red Bull feel like they're catching up on a time mitigation, but still a bit understeery as far as the RB21. To save a dying puppy, who are you picking to win that race, Peter?
Well, first of all, the use of the word old school, does that mean these days circuits that actually have decent corners? Is that what we call an old school circuit? Oh, it's a new circuit. It doesn't have any corners, just lots of DRS zones. Isn't that sad? That's where we're at. But yeah, it does have some good corners. It has turn 2 into turn 3, turn 4, turn 9, and the last corner. All good corners in Barcelona. All premium on time management. I don't go down the path of thinking that McLaren's big advantage over the last 12 months has been time management. I think it's been efficient downforce, much more than time management. I think they've had great time management because of the more efficient downforce they've been able to generate. So all that other stuff, thermoelectric things, red arrows over my head, I don't think that's really part of it. And I think efficient downforce may be more at a parity at the Spanish Grand Prix onwards because of the new flexi-wing regs we're going to see. I don't think the order will change, but I think Red Bull potentially might find it might be a bit more consistent with their car from circuit to circuit, and Ferrari might be a little bit nearer without losing any top speed and be a bit more consistent as well, and Mercedes as well. I mean, just going back to Monaco though, well, how do we explain how bad Mercedes were at Monaco?
Um, there are cool. It's tough, isn't it, Peter? But they are. They've always been two things that cars that have characterised that car. I think over the past 36 months since the brand new ground effect rules. In the first instance, they operate better in cooler climes, and it wasn't that warm. I think historically it had been cooler around Monaco than it was yesterday. And in the second instance, they don't do well. Like they're medium to high speed, aren't they? The stopping and starting and riding curbs has never been their thing. Their car just doesn't. It doesn't work well under those circumstances. So I just think it's an extension.
You mean they have to run too low and they can't get over curbs as a result?
100%.
Well, it's an efficient downforce. Yeah, I mean, obviously it was that. It was a kind of a rhetorical question. I'm not sure about the temperature thing though, because that was, you could argue that would be the case if the tires were on the limit, but they weren't. They were the softest in the range, and you could do 20, 30, 20 laps on the soft tire if you wanted to. So I'm not sure the climate, they can blame the temperatures that much. And even in a car which is not great over the curbs, you would imagine George would be somewhere near Max in a car which wasn't great over the curbs, but he was miles away. And Antonelli had two shunts involving apices rather than exits, which was a bit concerning as well. Kind of underline what I've been saying about him on medium fast corners. I know one of them was the chicane, and that was, I think, a function of all the pressure in qualifying in Q1 and what was going on some of those fast corners as well. But yeah, what a miserable weekend for Mercedes.
They were nowhere.
It's just unbelievable, isn't it, really, if you think about it. Anyway, going back, where will they be in Barcelona, Mercedes? It's hard to imagine they won't be right up there with, at least with Red Bull and Ferrari, and somewhere near McLaren, I think. Who's my pick? Let me think about it. Oh, Lando, again. I think Lando, assuming he doesn't press the old social media button again, I think Lando will be fine. And because, he beat Oscar Piastri for all the reasons that we've already spoken about, which is he's got this lovely feel for the front end of the car, lovely soft touch, which he's always had. Going back to Formula 3, probably even before that. Well, I'm sure it's before that. And Oscar's got that as well, but he's got into this sort of Alan Jonesy type way of driving, which is always, to bank on the rear and make sure that he's got the feel of the rear and he can see where he wants to go with the corner and the apex before he's really on it. And that's going to work well for him for the rest of the year, given the points he's got and everything else. And he's going to win a lot more races for sure. But Lando does have an ability to use the front end of the car more than Oscar does. And I think that'll definitely help him around Barcelona. It'll help him out of 2 into 3. I don't think he'll use as much road as he goes. He'll probably turn in from center into 3. And that's a really important part of the track because 3's flat and call it a straight if you like. And so that's really important that Lando will have the car straighter, I think, sooner than Oscar there, and will be asking less of the car and less of the tires as a result in that point. I think 9, they'll be very similar through 9, very little between them. There's not much you can do with the front or the rear there if you've got the downforce they've got. But in terms of braking, high-speed braking, Lando will be really good at the end of the straight there, going into 10. It won't make any mistakes, I don't think. And the last corner, probably line lock, but yeah, Lando will be nice through there. So I imagine Lando will have the edge by about a 10th on the lap. And Max will do quite well because of 2 to 3, because of 9, because of the last corner. He'll be very good there and not making errors. So yeah, I'd say Lando again.
Yeah.
But don't press the old social media button, Lando.
I just wanted to, I understand what you're saying about Lando. I've never doubted that Lando's potentially the quicker driver as versus Oscar Piastri. But it's always been a problem for him of execution. Fair play to him for getting it done around Monaco. Do you think he's turned a corner proper and that we're going to see consistent execution on his not insubstantial potential from Lando between now and race 24? Or do you think potentially that people speaking, accredited journalists speaking about Lando as having this Senna-like demeanour and countenance at Monaco, that might be an anomaly?
Well, it depends what you mean by Monaco. What we really mean by Monaco is what he did in Q3 under pressure in the last seconds of Q3. That's how he won the Monaco Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc, if you recall, was on the pole at that point, and the whole crowd had gone ballistic because Charles had got the pole. And here was Lando still not yet finishing his lap, under massive pressure, no mistakes, but be quicker than Charles Leclerc. And he did, and he was. He's the only guy under 111, you know.
Incredible.
Very impressive. And if you can do that under that sort of pressure at Monaco, and you've got Oscar Piastri as a teammate, then the rest of it's a piece of cake in terms of qualifying. And if you qualify well, not always going to win the race, but there's a pretty good chance you're going to have a number of victories. So I would say that is a major hump over which he's just passed, because qualifying well at Monaco in the dying milliseconds of Q3 is one of the most difficult things in Formula One. And he's just done it. He just did it beautifully. And he did it because he had a clear mind, he was calm, he was relaxed, and he just got the best from himself, which he hasn't done at any stage this year to date. And he did it at Monaco. So therefore, I think now he can build on that, definitely. If this was not Monaco, if this had been Imola, I'm not sure I'd be saying the same thing. Well, I wouldn't be. But because it was that vortex of pressure, I think it means a lot.
Let's go, Lando. He's hoping he can. Long may it continue. Although the second that I see him reactivate his social medias, Peter, I'm going to have to beg to differ. He's hoping that he can keep those blinkers on, and as you say, Peter, just be a hard-nosed racing driver.
and not concern himself with Oscar Piastri and what's going on that side of the garage. It's not only social media, it's also that. I mean, the social media is like a trigger for everything else that he now needs to do, which is just focus on L. Norris Esquire and nothing else, and not be concerned with what Oscar's doing or his telemetry or the way it's going there. He needs to become quite selfish and not such a big mate with Oscar. Yeah, you can do all the stuff you need to do for the branding, for McLaren, for Zach, and everything else. But in terms of winning the World Championship this year, I've spoken about this before, he needs to adopt, not necessarily every detail, but he needs to adopt the mindset of a Jimmy Connors when Connors was at his peak as a tennis player and would never stay in the same hotels as the rivals that he was potentially going to meet in the semis or the finals, because he didn't want to see their faces. He just wanted to just focus 100% on what he was going to do. And he tried to build up a sort of hatred of the opponents. I'm not in any way encouraging that, but I'm just saying Lando needs to isolate himself from all that glad, happy McLaren stuff and become much more leaner and meaner if he wants to win the World Championship this year and beat Oscar Piastri, because that's still his biggest problem, to beat Oscar.
You know, Peter, I suspect that Lando Norris watches your videos. And I'm not even not a hint of tongue-in-cheek at all. I was watching him in the the cool-down room, and it was almost as if Oscar cracked a joke, and he said, Lando, I thought I saw the smoke coming out from your front left or whatever going to turn one, and I thought 1,000% that you were going to be in the barrier. And as soon as Oscar said that to Lando, he didn't look left ever again. He was only talking to Charles Leclerc on his right. It was as if Oscar Piastri wasn't even in the room. So I think, Peter, I suspect that Lando is listening to your God tier F1 insight and taking heed. I suspect.
Well, he's probably not. But anyway, somebody who's close to him might mention it. And he needs to have that Jimmy Connors approach now, because Oscar Piastri is very, very good. And he's got very good people around him. And he's in a great racing car.
Yeah.
And he's not going to be easy to beat for the championship. The only way to do it is to become very, very hard-nosed.
Yeah, let's see. It will be an interesting second and third of the championship. Mr. Windsor, as always, you've been an absolute legend. Super generous with your time. If you're watching this and you're not subscribed to Peter D. Windsor on YouTube, what are you doing with your life? You are not an F1 fan. You cannot call yourself an F1 fan. Go and subscribe to Peter Windsor on YouTube. And shortly thereafter, if you enjoy a cheeky podcast or two, F1-centric podcast or two on your favourite podcasting platform, subscribe, follow, 5 stars, Peter D. Windsor Short Corners podcast. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, do me a favour, like, comment and share. If you're listening on a podcasting platform, 5 stars and a follow. Thank you as always, Mr. Windsor, you're a legend. Between now and next time, gang, remember as always to look but never stare.